She preached honesty, condemned greed, and promised to clean up Washington, until Pam Bondi dropped a bombshell that sent the FBI knocking on her door. Victoria Halston stood behind the mahogany podium, her smile polished, her voice smooth. The cameras flashed, capturing every angle of the woman who had built her career on moral superiority. The crowd before her, a mix of journalists, supporters, and political insiders, leaned in, waiting for her words, eager to hang on to every syllable. "This administration will never bow to corruption," she declared, her voice firm, conviction dripping from every syllable. "We will expose every fraudster, every backroom deal, every betrayal of the people's trust." Applause erupted. Cameras zoomed in. This was Victoria at her best, confident, untouchable, righteous. But outside the building, something was brewing. Across town, in a quiet, dimly lit newsroom, Pam Bondi sat in front of a stack of documents that told a different story, one that would shatter Victoria's carefully curated image. Pages filled with bank transactions, wire transfers, and encrypted emails laid out the truth in black and white. Money, millions of dollars, had moved through a complex web of shell companies, hidden under the guise of non-profit donations. The final destination? Victoria's personal accounts, luxury properties, and overseas investments. Pam let out a slow breath. She knew exactly what she had in her hands. "This isn't just a scandal," she murmured, flipping through the pages. "This is political suicide." She reached for her phone. It was time to go public. Victoria had mastered the art of outrage. She built her reputation on fiery speeches denouncing corporate greed, attacking privileged elites, and promising to dismantle a system rigged for the wealthy. She had framed herself as the voice of the people, someone who had clawed her way to the top despite obstacles. Her story was compelling: a single mother, a fighter, a woman who knew struggle and vowed to bring justice. She had won her last election in a landslide, fueled by donations from grassroots supporters who saw her as a beacon of hope. But behind closed doors, the truth was much uglier. Emails buried deep within encrypted servers revealed conversations with high-profile donors, some of whom had ties to foreign entities. Promises were made, deals struck, favors exchanged. She wasn't dismantling corruption, she was swimming in it. And now, it was all about to come crashing down. Pam Bondi wasn't working alone. A whistleblower, an insider, had come forward with damning evidence. A former staffer, whose name remained anonymous for safety reasons, had spent months collecting data, documents, phone recordings, hidden emails, all pointing to a system so deeply entrenched in fraud that it made previous political scandals look like minor infractions. One of the leaked emails stood out the most. "We need to move the funds discreetly. I don't want this traced back to the campaign. Keep everything under the non-profits umbrella. It worked last time." Victoria's name was signed at the bottom. It was undeniable. And now, Pam Bondi was about to blow the lid off it all. Victoria had no idea what was coming. At that moment, she was still at the podium, basking in the cheers of the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries. She was untouchable, a champion of the people. But back at the newsroom, Pam Bondi was on the phone with a major news network, arranging an exclusive primetime broadcast. In less than 24 hours, the entire country would know the truth. And when they did, Victoria Halston's empire would start to crumble. But the real question was, how would she fight back? The countdown had begun. Pam Bondi sat in the brightly lit newsroom, microphone clipped, stacks of incriminating documents spread before her. The network had cleared an entire segment for this, a primetime exclusive. Across the country, millions of Americans would soon watch one of the most powerful women in politics get exposed in real time. The producer's voice crackled in her earpiece. "We'll live in 5, 4, 3. Pam straightened. "Dinner's term. Good evening. What I have in my hands tonight is not just another political scandal, it's a betrayal of public trust at the highest level." She held up the first document to the camera. The logo of a non-profit organization, one Victoria Halston had personally championed, was stamped across the top. Congresswoman Halston has spent years positioning herself as an enemy of corruption, a fighter for the people. But leaked documents from an anonymous insider tell a much different story. The screen behind her lit up with wire transfers, offshore accounts, encrypted emails, evidence that was impossible to ignore. The numbers didn't lie. Millions had been funneled into personal accounts. Disguised as donations for social justice initiatives, Pam let the weight of her words settle before delivering the final blow. Not only has Congresswoman Halston misused campaign funds, but sources indicate she also has direct financial ties to foreign donors, some with questionable agendas. The newsroom fell silent. The weight of the accusation was staggering. Across the country, social media exploded the moment the broadcast ended. Panic set in. At Victoria Halston's campaign headquarters in Austin, Texas, the mood shifted from celebration to crisis. Staffers, still riding the high from her earlier rally, stared at their screens in disbelief. Phones started ringing. Text messages came flooding in. News anchors, political analysts, and opposition leaders were already dissecting every detail of the report. In her private office, Victoria stood frozen, eyes locked on the screen. She had always known she walked a fine line, that the deals she made came with risks. But she never expected this level of exposure. Her chief of staff, Noah Brennan, burst through the door, his face pale, gripping his phone like a lifeline. "We need a response. Now." Victoria snapped out of her daze. "Damage control," she ordered, already moving toward her desk. "Get the legal team on the line. I want every news outlet to know these allegations are false." But even as she spoke, she knew the truth. They weren't false. Minutes later, Victoria's team issued an official statement. "These baseless accusations are nothing more than a coordinated political attack. Congresswoman Halston has always operated with the highest ethical standards and will not be intimidated by right-wing media smear campaigns. It was textbook political defense, deny, discredit, deflect. But the public wasn't buying it. Pam Bondi had receipts. And more were coming. But how far would Victoria go to keep her secrets buried? The walls were closing in. Victoria Halston paced across her office, the soft click of her heels against the marble floor the only steady rhythm in the chaos unraveling around her. In one hand, she clutched her phone. In the other, a half-empty tumbler of whiskey, a habit she had picked up during her first campaign, back when her biggest problem had been bad polling numbers. Now, she was at the center of a political firestorm. Outside her office, her team was in full-blown crisis mode. The phones wouldn't stop ringing. Staffers whispered frantically in hallways. Aides rushed in and out, their faces a mix of confusion and panic. The press was circling like sharks, demanding answers. And the leaks, they weren't stopping. Her chief of staff, Noah Brennan, shoved open the door without knocking, his tie loosened, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. He looked like he had just come from a funeral. "It's worse than we thought," he said, dropping a fresh stack of documents onto her desk. "More leaks? The financials. The emails. Bondi's people have everything." Victoria didn't move. She just stared at the papers. At the neat rows of transactions. At the numbers that now had her name all over them. "This can't be happening." "How the hell did this happen?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to make Noah flinch. "Whistleblower," he said, rubbing his temple. "Someone close." They knew exactly where to look. Victoria felt the room tilt slightly. Someone inside her circle had turned. Someone with access to the encrypted files, the offshore accounts, the private memos she had assumed were buried. She gritted her teeth. It wasn't a question of if she had enemies. It was a question of who had finally grown a conscience. Then, her phone buzzed in her hand. Private number. She hesitated. Her gut told her not to pick up. But she did anyway. "This is Halston." Silence. Then, a voice, smooth, measured, and unmistakably powerful. "Congresswoman, we need to talk." Victoria's grip tightened around the phone. She knew the voice. One of her donors. A name that never appeared on paper. Someone whose money moved in the shadows, funding elections, silencing opponents, controlling narratives. "This is not a good time," she said, turning toward the window, her reflection staring back at her, pale and drawn. "It wasn't a good time for us either when your little operation got exposed." The voice was calm. Detached. Too calm. "Now it's a problem. And if it's our problem, it's your problem." A cold weight settled in her stomach. This wasn't just about politics anymore. This was dangerous. "I'll handle it," she said carefully. A pause. "Then you'd better. We don't like loose ends." The line went dead. Victoria just stood there, the phone still pressed to her ear, as if she could rewind the last 5 minutes and undo everything. Noah cleared his throat, snapping her back. "FBI is getting involved," he said, his voice lower now. Like he was afraid to say it too loud. "They're reviewing the financials. They'll be pulling records. Subpoenas will go out. We're running out of time." Victoria's vision sharpened. She had fought too hard for this career, for this power. She had built herself from nothing. She wasn't about to watch it all burn down. Her jaw clenched. Her pulse studied. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. She grabbed her glass and slammed it onto the desk, the sound slicing through the tense air. "Then we get ahead of them." Noah blinked. "How?" Victoria turned to face him, her mind already working. She had spent years crafting narratives, flipping scandals, shifting blame. This wasn't new territory. She just needed the right distraction. "Find me a scapegoat," she said, her voice cold and measured. "Someone to take the fall." Noah hesitated. There was a line they hadn't crossed before. She stared him down. "Now, Noah." He nodded stiffly and left the room, shutting the door behind him. Victoria let out a slow breath. The scandal was a hurricane, threatening to rip everything apart. But if she played this right, she might still outrun it. But what if this time the storm was too big to escape? Victoria Halston had always known Washington was a battlefield. But tonight, the knives weren't just coming from her enemies. They were coming from inside her own camp. She watched the newsfeed on the massive screen in her office, her hands gripping the armrest of her chair, her nails digging into the leather. Every major network was covering the scandal now. Pam Bondi's expose had done its job. Sources confirmed that an FBI investigation is now underway, with several subpoenas already issued. Halston's campaign denies all allegations, but leaked documents paint a damning picture. Several Democratic lawmakers have issued statements condemning corruption at any level of government. Victoria's stomach twisted. She recognized the game. The same colleagues who had once lined up behind her, clapping at her speeches, were already jumping ship. The biggest blow came just minutes later. Her phone buzzed with a notification from Senator Richard Langford, one of her strongest allies. She read the statement out loud, her voice dripping with disbelief. "I have always believed in transparency and accountability in public service. While the allegations against my friend and colleague Victoria Halston are deeply troubling, I trust that the justice system will handle this fairly. No one is above the law." The room fell silent. Noah, still standing in the corner, exhaled slowly. "That's it." Victoria's head snapped toward him. "The hell it is." Langford just distanced himself. "More will follow." He ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. "They're treating you like a dead woman walking." Victoria slammed her phone onto the desk. "Not yet." But deep down, she knew he was right. Her donors were panicking. Calls went unanswered. Texts read but not replied to. The money that had once flowed so freely was drying up. Overnight, the lifelines were disappearing one by one. An hour later, Victoria sat in a dimly lit conference room with her lawyers and top aides. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, flickering. Everyone looked drained. "We need a sacrifice," she said bluntly, breaking the silence. No one reacted. They had expected this. Noah cleared his throat. "We've identified someone." He slid a manila folder across the table. Victoria flipped it open. Elliot Shaw, Senior Finance Director. He had been with her campaign for years. Loyal. Competent. Maybe a little naive. Perfect. "Can we sell it?" she asked, tapping a finger against the folder. One of her lawyers, a slim woman with sharp features, nodded. "If we spin it right. An internal mismanagement issue. Maybe claim he handled financial transactions without your direct knowledge." "He won't go down quietly," another aide said. "If we throw him under the bus, he could turn on you." Victoria stared at the file, her mind already 5 steps ahead. "Then we make sure he doesn't." A long pause. No one dared to ask what she meant. They didn't have to. But even if Elliot took the fall, would it be enough to stop what was coming? Elliot Shaw had always been a loyal soldier. But tonight, he was a man walking into a trap. Victoria Halston sat at the head of the long conference table, a practiced look of concern on her face. The dim glow of the overhead light cast deep shadows across the tense room. Around her, lawyers and senior aides sat in stiff silence, their expressions unreadable. Elliot, still in his rumpled suit from a long day, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He wasn't stupid. He knew something was off. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, his voice tight. Victoria leaned forward. Pressing her hands together, "Elliot, you know how much I value you. You've been with me through everything." He nodded slowly, but his eyes flickered toward Noah Brennan, who was studying him like a chess piece about to be sacrificed. "We have a problem," Victoria continued. "The media is out for blood, the FBI is circling, and someone has to answer for this mess." Elliot sat up straighter. "Someone?" A heavy silence filled the room. Then Noah slid a document toward him, resignation papers, a full confession. Elliot blinked. His fingers hovered over the pages, but didn't touch them. "You're throwing me under the bus," he said flatly. Victoria sighed, tilting her head slightly, like she was disappointed in him for not playing along. "You're the finance director, Elliot. These were your transactions. If we frame this as an oversight, something you regret, the whole thing dies here." His jaw clenched. "And if I say no?" Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Then I can't guarantee what happens next." Elliot swallowed hard. He looked around the table, searching for anyone who might intervene. No one would meet his eyes. "You always talked about fighting corruption," he muttered. "Guess that was just a damn slogan." Victoria didn't flinch. "Sign the papers, Elliot. Take the deal." For a moment, he looked like he might actually do it, might take the fall, disappear into political exile, become another forgotten casualty of Washington's power games. But then his hand curled into a fist. "No." A flicker of irritation crossed Victoria's face. He wasn't supposed to resist. Elliot pushed the documents back. "I'm not taking the fall for you. If I go down, I'm taking everything with me." The air in the room shifted. Noah tensed. The lawyers exchanged quick glances. Victoria's expression hardened. For the first time in years, someone had dared to defy her. "You really want to do this?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Elliot stood, shoving his chair back. "I'll talk to the FBI myself. Let's see how much damage I can do." He turned and walked out. Victoria exhaled through her nose, pressing her fingers to her temples. "Fix this," she muttered to Noah. He hesitated. "How far?" She didn't answer right away. Then, without looking up, she spoke. "Make sure he doesn't talk." But was it already too late? Victoria Halston had survived countless political storms, but this time she was drowning. Elliot Shaw was supposed to be a loose end, someone easily handled. But instead of disappearing quietly, he had walked straight into an FBI field office in Dallas the next morning. By noon, federal agents were knocking on doors. Victoria's lawyers were still scrambling to contain the fallout when the breaking news alert hit every major network. New developments in the Halston corruption scandal as former finance director Elliot Shaw cooperates with federal investigators. Sources confirm that the Congresswoman is now facing potential charges related to financial misconduct and foreign influence. Victoria froze in the middle of her morning briefing, the words crashing over her like a tidal wave. Her team watched her carefully, waiting for orders. There was no fixing this. No spinning it. Her phone buzzed again. Another call. Another donor pulling out. Another politician distancing themselves. It was over. That evening, Victoria emerged from her office for what would be her last press conference. She stepped in front of the podium, cameras flashing, microphones waiting. The room wasn't filled with supporters anymore. It was filled with journalists, hungry for a confession, for a moment of weakness. She took a slow breath. Then she did what she had always done best. She performed. "I have always fought for the people of this country," she began, voice steady. "And I will not let these politically motivated attacks define my legacy." She denied everything. Called it a smear campaign. Blamed it on a disgruntled employee. But her words lacked fire. Lacked conviction. For the first time in years, no one was buying it. 2 days later, the FBI raided her home. Victoria watched from behind tinted windows as agents carried out boxes of documents, computers, hard drives. She knew what was coming next. By the time the indictment was announced, her former allies had already moved on, pretending they had never known her. Pretending they hadn't attended her fundraisers. Pretending they weren't on those emails. She was alone. The calls stopped. The invitations disappeared. The woman who had once controlled the headlines was now just another disgraced politician. Her entire career had been built on exposing corruption. And in the end, she had become the very thing she claimed to fight against. Power corrupts. Ambition without limits destroys everything it touches. Victoria Halston had convinced millions that she was different, that she was the answer to a broken system. But the truth always catches up. And when it did, it left nothing but ruin. What do you think? Should corrupt politicians be held to the same standard as the people they claim to represent? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more.